Foreign exchange risk management is a topic of contemporary importance because nowadays the trade and business, which is involving the conversion of foreign currencies or which involve the foreign exchange, that for that kind of businesses, foreign exchange has become a very important and pertinent issue. And when we talk of what kind of risk and exposure is being posed by the fluctuations in the exchange market on the cash flows of a company or a business entity, we can understand it from three different perspectives. One such perspective is that what is the impact of this fluctuation in the exchange rate on the value of the firm. Value of the firm means the firm which is involved in the business across the border. So if exchange rate fluctuates, then the effect of this fluctuation on the value of the firm both in the host country and in the home country. Apart from that, so we can understand this as economic impact of the exchange rate fluctuation. Then we have the firms which are involved in trade, export and import. For that kind of firms, we know that they have contractual obligations, they deal in foreign currencies. So in that context, the exposure of the firm's cash flows we can understand through transactional requirement. And the third one is, we know that the firms now, they have varied supply chains. They have to maintain entities all across the world. They may be having different subsidiaries which is scattered throughout the world. So for those kinds of firms, it is very important to have consolidated financial statement. When we talk of consolidated financial statement, it means that the subsidiaries financial statements, they are converted into parent company's balance sheet and income statement. So for that purpose, we need to convert currencies into parent company's currency, that is the reporting currency. So when we convert the currency in the reporting currency, the functional currency into reporting currency, the rate might be against the interest of the business entity, or it might be favorable. So that may result in book profit or book losses. So that is due to conversion of figures of annual report. So we can term it as translation. When we translate the figures of subsidiary companies' balance sheet, income statement into the parent company's annual report. So these are three different kinds of different impacts which a firm may have on different aspects due to a fluctuation in the exchange rate. Now, when we talk of the fluctuation in the exchange market or the fluctuation in the foreign exchange rate, two terms are very important here. One is foreign exchange risk and other one is foreign exchange exposure. So foreign exchange exposure means the extent to which the firm's cash flows are exposed to foreign exchange rate fluctuation. For instance, if we say that there is a US company which is owning British company and it is having assets in Britain. So in that case, we can say that the value of the pound value of British asset is being affected due to the domestic considerations, economic considerations like inflation, interest rate, and so on and so forth. But the dollar value of these assets which are invested in British market, now the dollar value of that investment will be dependent on the spot rate between pound and dollar. So to what extent this fluctuation is affecting the dollar value of asset, British asset, we can term it as exposure. Now this exposure may result in loss or gain for the business entity. So but we don't know exactly whether loss will happen or gain will be there. So but something will happen. So that is why when we say that our cash flows are exposed, our cash flows are susceptible to the foreign exchange rate fluctuations. So to what extent there will be the variability of the cash flows due to fluctuation in the cash flow. So that variability we define as foreign exchange risk. So for instance, if I say the total cash flow which is exposed to foreign exchange risk in pound terms for a US company which is owning a British asset, let's suppose it is 2,000 pounds. Now this 2,000 pound this shows the exposure. but to what extent actually the risk the firm is facing in pound terms, that will be at the variability of the valuation of the asset, British asset owned by the US company in Britain. That will represent the foreign exchange risk. So this is a small difference between foreign exchange exposure and foreign exchange risk. Normally we say exposure risk, or the risk which is due to foreign exchange rate fluctuation, we call it as foreign exchange risk. And there are various ways to manage or to hedge these risks which emanate because of fluctuation in the exchange rate, and hedging techniques are there. So as I discussed earlier, that there are three broad categories of impact. One is the transactional impact, so we can call it as transaction exposure. Then we have translation, so translation exposure. And third one is the impact of exchange rate fluctuation on the value of the firm. So we can call it as economic exposure. So in totality, there are three different kinds of exposure which we can understand due to foreign exchange rate fluctuation. One is the transaction exposure, second one is translation exposure, and third one is economic exposure. So let us a little bit understand how to measure, how to understand this economic exposure. Now, as I said, as I gave example of US and British company, the value of the company. So here, when we talk about the value, the price of an asset owned by a US company in British market, on what factors this price is dependent. So let's suppose we are explaining this with help of some kind of linear regression equation. There is a linear relationship. The pound price, the dollar price of British asset is directly proportional to the spot rate. So we can represent through a linear relationship that if P is the pound price, is the dollar price of British asset, so then it is equal to A plus beta and then S. S is spot rate between dollar and pound plus some error. Which we for the purpose of our discussion, we mean it to be zero. So there is a linear relationship between the dollar value of British asset, which is P is equal to A plus beta or B into S. So here A is a constant figure and B is the coefficient, regression coefficient, which we understand. So this explains the extent of relationship between the dollar value of British asset and the spot rate. So if spot rate fluctuation will affect the dollar value of British price, the British asset, so then we can say there is a direct relationship. But it might be possible that exchange rate is going in one direction and the dollar value of British asset is going in other direction. So we can say that there is no relationship. And if there is, if we say that the dollar value of British asset and the spot rate, they are going in the same direction. So all different kind of combination can happen. So for that purpose, let us take an example. One such the example which I earlier take, that there is a US company which is owning British asset in British market. So if that company is having some kind of physical infrastructure in British market, so if if US company is owning that asset, so when we say that the value of that asset is increasing or decreasing, so there are two important factors which will decide the value of that asset. One is the domestic inflation in the British market. So if the price, there is general tendency of increase in the price level, so the value of that asset being owned by the US company in British market will go up. And secondly, if the pound appreciates in comparison to US dollar, then what will be the impact of this on the dollar value of this British asset? So that dollar value will go down because pound appreciates. And we all know that if inflation goes up, if let's suppose in British market inflation is more in comparison to US economy, as per purchasing power parity, the pound should depreciate by the same proportion. So if there is an inflation, then it might be possible that due to inflation, the depreciation which is being caused in the pound price of British asset, in the dollar price of British asset, because now pound should depreciate. And if pounds will depreciate, then what is the impact of this? So the dollar value of British asset will go down. On one side, inflation is increasing the price level of the British asset. On other side, the number of pounds which you need to convert pound into dollar, that will be more. So it means in dollar terms the value will go down, means it will be restored. The original value pre-inflation will be restored, because on one side inflation is going up and on other side the value of pound in terms of dollar is going down, going down. Secondly, we can take that, let's suppose the spot rate is independent of the inflation rate. The prices are increasing and spot rate is behaving like in other direction. So the domestic prices are increasing in British market, and on other side the pound price, let's suppose pound is appreciating. The pound is appreciating. So normally we know as per purchasing power parity that pound should depreciate, but let's suppose here pound is appreciating. Now what will be the impact of this appreciation on the dollar value of British assets? So on one side, the price of British asset is going up because of inflation in the economy, British economy. On the second side, on the second hand, what happens that you need now, lesser pound to get $1, because what is happening that the pound price has appreciated, the pound has appreciated against US dollar. So it means per pound you are going to have more number of dollars. So in terms of that, on one side your pound price is increasing, on other side the dollar value of British asset will also go up because of depreciation of US dollar. So here the different combinations can be there. So to get rid of this problem, anything can happen. This is a ideal condition, does not exist, or it's seldom exists. So how to get rid of these problem? Because of the fluctuation in the exchange rate, if I am the employee or I am the officer of US company, then how to I am going to manage the dollar value of British asset because of the foreign exchange rate fluctuation. Inflation is causing some change in the value of my asset in Britain. Then apart from that, spot market is also causing change in my value of my asset. So how I am going to manage the value of that asset, because ultimately I have to hedge my position, because if I am going to lose the value of my British asset, it will be reflected in my annual report or balance sheet back in the home country. So how I am going to manage that position? So let us understand this. One thing is also very important, that on the basis of when we decide to manage this kind of exposure or risk, we have to decide also to hedge or not to hedge. Hedge means whether hedging will remove or reduce the variability of our cash flows, because normally the objective of hedging is to manage the risk. Managing the risk means where we are streamlining the cash flow. So whether with the help of hedging, are we able to streamline our cash flows or not? So we have to also decide one very important thing, to hedge or not to hedge. It might also be possible that even if we are not going for any hedging strategy, we might be able to manage our risk very well. So we have to also solve this decision puzzle, that whether we have to hedge, we have to go for hedging or not to go for hedging. So with help of this illustration which I am going to explain you, we will discuss that first thing is that what kind of exposure or risk in quantitative terms the US company is facing in dollar terms in British market, and second one, whether hedging will be good for the company or not, and third, what should be the proper hedging strategy, what should be the proper hedging instrument for the US company for its British asset in dollar terms. So that we will discuss and with help of one illustration. Before coming down to the illustration, just want to make you understand that how we can measure the exposure. Like I explained you earlier, that with help of that linear equation, that is, if P is the dollar price of British asset and S is the spot rate between pound and dollar, so P is equal to A plus B, beta is the exposure coefficient into S is the spot rate. So it means that this beta is the intensity of is that thing which defines the intensity of relationship between P and S. So if beta is 0, if regression coefficient or exposure coefficient is 0, then it means the the dollar price of British asset is independent of exchange rate changes, spot rate changes. So if more and more exposure coefficient is, it means that there will be more dependency of dollar value of British asset on spot rate. So now the question is how to calculate the exposure coefficient, that is beta. So the formula for calculation of beta is very simple. It is covariance between P and S. So P is the dollar price of British asset and S is the spot rate divided by variance of S. So we can use this formula for calculation of exposure coefficient. Now we are going to take up that illustration, and in that illustration we will take up three different scenario. One thing is inflation. Two variables we are going to take, three different scenario, and there will be equal likelihood of these three scenarios. So we are also going to associate probability of occurrence of these three three scenarios, 1 by 3, 1 by 3, 1 by 3. So we can here assume that on one side there is inflation, the increase in the prices of dollar value of British asset, and as well as the pound price of British asset. Due to inflation, the pound price of British asset is also going up or down. And on other side, we will also take that there is some changes in the spot rate. So in all the three different scenario, we will be having three different spot rate. So let's suppose that spot rate is equal to 1 pound is equal to $1.4, $1.5, $1.6. So three different exchange rates, that is spot rate is changing in every scenario. So one such scenario is when the domestic prices in pound, they are going up. When the second scenario is when they are going down, and third scenario is when prices are remaining constant. So then we will try to calculate the dollar value of British asset by multiplying S and the pound price, and then we get what we call dollar value of British asset. And after, so in every scenario we have assumed that there will be the difference in the exchange rate between the pound and dollar. So if we are going to take the first case, in the first case also three different case we are going to take up. Since this is an illustration, I've done it, so I'm explaining you with help of example. So probability of these three occurrence of these three scenario are equal 1 by 3, 1 by 3, 1 by 3. So in the first scenario we are taking that the pound price of British asset is increasing. So in the first case, the increasing trend of pound price of British asset is first one is 980. From 980 it went up to 1000, and then after that it is 1070 pounds. So these are all in pound, the pound price of British asset, starting from 980 pounds, then 1000 pound, and then 1070 pound. Now corresponding to this, when the price is 980 pound, then let's suppose the spot exchange rate is $1.4. The spot exchange rate is $1.4. And when the pound price of British asset is 1000 pounds, then the exchange rate is $1.5. And when the pound price of British asset is 1070 pound, the exchange rate is $1.6. So this is the scenario in the illustration, the first case. And now let us calculate the dollar value of British asset. The dollar value of British asset in the first case, when the pound price of British asset is 980 pound, the spot exchange rate is $1.4. So the dollar price of British asset will come $1,372. In the second case, when we assume that the pound price is 1000 pound and the spot exchange rate is $1.5. So the dollar price of British asset is $1,500. The third case is 1070 is the value of pound price British asset, and 1.6 is the spot rate. So you multiply both, you get the dollar value of British asset as 1712. So this we got the dollar. On one side we are having the probability 1 by 3, 1 by 3, 1 by 3. On other side we have the price of British asset in pound terms owned by the US company. So the prices are 980, went up to 1000, and then going up to 1070. And corresponding to these three different prices, we have assumed there will be three different spot rates: $1.4, $1.5, $1.6. So, and then multiplying this pound price into spot rate, then you get the dollar value of British asset, and that I have already explained to you. Now take the second case. In second case, we are going to assume that the pound price of British asset is declining. Here the case is of deflation. The prices, the inflation is going down. It is not inflation, the prices are going down. So again the three, in the second case, again we are going to take the three cases. All the cases will be having equal likelihood of occurrence. So 1 by 3, 1 by 3, 1 by 3, the probability we are associating. And corresponding to that, the first price, that is after which the prices they are going down, pound price. So let's suppose it is 1,000 pound. From 1,000 pound it went down to 933 pound, and then it went down to 875 pound. So from 1,000 it went down to 933 pound, and then again it went down to 875. So these three scenario I have taken in the second case. And corresponding to this, again the same exchange rate corresponding to 1,000 pound. Let's suppose the exchange rate is $1.4. When the pound price is going down from 1,000 to 933 pound, then corresponding to that the exchange rate is $1.5, and for the last one it is $1.6. So then you multiplying that, what we did in the first case, you will getting the dollar value of British asset. Similarly, in the third case, let's suppose there is no inflation, no deflation, the prices of the pound price of British asset is remaining constant. There is no change in the price level. So it means three different scenario we will take in the third case, and all in these three different scenario, the prices of the price of pound price of British asset owned by the US company, it remains constant. So 1,000 pound, 1,000 pound, 1,000 pound. So we are assuming that the prices, there is no effect of change, there is no change in the prices. So it means that corresponding to that, but there will be fluctuation in the exchange rate market. So for 1,000 pound, 1.4 spot rate. For again the second scenario, we assume that there is no change in the value of pound value of the British assets. So again 1.5 spot rate, and then 1.6. See, there may be thousands of cases. I have taken this case because I have done my calculation on the basis of these figures. You can use software, you can use MS Excel, just find out thousands of combination, and you will be having your own data for it. Now this calculation is based on these data. So on the basis of this, we get the value of British dollar value of British asset. It is increasing in some proportion, in some series. So dollar value of British asset is $1,400, $1,500, and $1,600. So this is the scenario. These are the scenario. 9 different scenarios are there in 3 different conditions. In first case, we have assumed that prices are increasing, the pound price of British asset is increasing. In second case, we have assumed that pound price of British asset is going down, and in the third case, we have assumed that pound price is not changing at all. Pound price is remaining constant. So on the basis of this, we have tried to find out a relationship between two things. First thing is that on one side we are having pound price of British asset, on other side we are having the spot rate, and third thing is there, the dollar value of British asset. Now, can we calculate the exposure coefficient or amount of exposure beta in all the 3 cases? So putting everything in the formula, I am just giving you the computation of variance and covariance. So you all must be aware of that. So I am not going in the detail of formula. Formula you can borrow from the books. But still for your reference, I am giving you the formula. So variance of S is the spot rate. How to calculate the variance of S? So summation QI multiplied by, in bracket, SI minus S bar. So what is SI? SI is the spot rate, and S bar is the average, what we call average of spot rate. The 3 different conditions, spot rates we have taken, so average of that. And Q, the number of cases, so it is 3. So this is how we calculate the variance and covariance between P and S. P is the dollar value of British asset, and S is the spot rate. So again, summation QI multiplied by PI minus P bar, in bracket close, then SI minus S bar. So with help of this formula, you can calculate the exposure coefficient in all the 3 different scenarios. in all the three different cases, and in every case we have three different scenarios. So when we are going to calculate this covariance in this coefficient, in the first case, when the pound price is increasing, the pound price of British asset is increasing, so covariance between P and S is coming out to be 34/3, and variance of S is coming out to be 0.02 divided by 3. So total coefficient is covariance between P and S and variance of S. It is coming out 1700 pound. Now remember one thing, that this exposure is in pound for US company. It cannot be in dollar, because dollar is the home currency of the US company. So exposure is always in the foreign currency. So, and here we are talking from the perspective of the US parent company. So here the exposure coefficient will be in pound terms. So total amount of exposure. In the second case, when we have assumed that pound price of British asset is going down, pound price of British asset is going down, but on other side the dollar value of pound, that is 1.4, 1.5, 1.6. So here pound is appreciating, dollar is depreciating, and pound is appreciating. So what is the impact of this? On one side, see, the pound price of British asset is going down. On other side, when this decline in the pound price, when you are going to convert this pound price into dollar terms, you will be getting more dollars. So it means that the loss which you are going to have due to decline in the pound price of British asset will be nullified by what we call the depreciation of US dollar. So that's why you find that the dollar value of British asset is coming constant, 1400, 1400 and 1400. So here in this case, the exposure is zero. Exposure is zero. So if exposure is zero, it means that we don't have to hedge anything, because exposure is zero. B is zero. Covariance between P and S is zero. Variance of S is 0.02/3. In the third case, where we assume that pound price of British asset is constant, 1000 pound, 1000 pound, 1000 pound. So here we have assumed that pound price of British asset is constant. It is not changing. So this condition may also prevail in the economy. We have taken different scenarios. So this condition can also prevail in the economy, where we have assumed that pound price of British asset is constant, 1000, 1000, 1000. But exchange rate is changing, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6. So if that thing is happening, then dollar value of British asset, 1400, 1500, 1600, that will be the dollar value of British asset. And here in this case, if you calculate the exposure, the amount of exposure, it is coming out to be 1000. On the basis of calculation, it is coming out to be 1000, and where the covariance between P and S is coming out to be 20/3, and variance of S, it is same as 0.02/3. So in this way, you are getting different amount of exposure. In the first case, your exposure is highest, 1700 pound. In the first case, your exposure is highest. Why? The reason is that on one side, see, the prices, due to inflation, the pound price is increasing. On other side, the dollar is also depreciating, and it means that your value of asset is going up. On one side, it is going up due to inflation, and on other side, it is also the dollar is depreciating. So if dollar is depreciating, it means when you convert 1 pound into what we call dollar, you are going to get more number of dollars. So more pound is you are exposing there in the first case, and in the second case it is zero, and in the last case it is constant, it is 1000 pound. So the thing is, in the second scenario, you don't need to have any kind of hedging technique, or you don't need to go for, in fact, any hedging instrument. But in the first case and in the third case, you need to go for hedging, because now if we see before coming down to actually to hedge or not to hedge, the most important thing here is that if in the first scenario, when we see the value of exposure is coming out to be 1700 pound, in the second case it is zero, and in the third case it is coming out to be 1000 pound. So let us first discuss the third case. Can we completely hedge our position or hedge the foreign exchange exposure when there is the third scenario, existence of third scenario, when the value of the dollar value of British asset, it is increasing 1400, 1500, 1600, but on other side the pound price of British asset is constant, 1000 pound, 1000 pound, 1000 pound, it is not changing. There is no inflation or deflation kind of thing in the British economy. And third, the what we are getting the amount of exposure as 1000 pound. So here the value of the British asset is not changing, it is remaining constant at 1000 pound, and the exposure coefficient is also coming out to be 1000 pound. So here the US company can completely eliminate foreign exchange risk, or it can completely manage its foreign exchange exposure if it sells 1000 pound 1 year forward through a forward contract, 1000 pound. So here with this contract, forward contract, if the US company sells 1000 pound forward, then it will be able to completely eliminate the foreign exchange risk or exposure which it is facing. But in the first scenario, now you see what will happen. In the first scenario, when the exposure coefficient is 1700 pound. So even if here the US company is going to take a forward cover of this 1700 pound, the exposure cannot be totally eliminated. So why it is so? Let's suppose in the first case the US company has taken a forward cover of selling 1700 pounds. Now in that case, what happens? Now, if exposure is 1700, corresponding to the three different cases, when we have future spot, the spot rate is coming out to be 1.5, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, and if we assume that forward rate is $1.5. So in the first case, so how we are going to calculate the residual value of the forward contract? So it is 1700 pound multiplied by F minus S. F is the forward rate and S is the spot rate. So if F is $1.5 and S is the spot rate, so 1700 pound we have taken the forward cover. So when we calculate the residual value in terms of dollar, then we need to multiply it by the difference of F minus S expressed in dollar terms. So F is $1.5. So if and S, let's suppose three different cases of S may exist: 1.4, 1.5, 1.6. So if it is 1.4, then 1700 multiplied by F is 1.5 minus 1.4. So it means the residual value of cash, or the funds, it will be $170. $170, because forward rate is $1.5 and spot rate is $1.4. So 1.5 minus 1.4 and multiplied by 1700 pounds, it will give you $170. On other side, this is the residual value of the contract. That is positive cash flow for the US company. Now on the other side, if the spot rate is coming out to be equal to the forward rate, in that case there will be no residual value of the forward cover. In the third case, when the spot rate is 1.6, so in that case the firm will be having a loss. That is, forward rate is 1.5, so 1.5 minus 1.6 multiplied by 1700. So in that case there is minus $170 of negative cash flow for the company. So it means that due to this residual value in all these three different scenarios, the foreign exchange risk is not completely eliminated, as in the third case, where we have seen that the pound price of British asset is remaining constant and the exposure coefficient is equal to, the amount of exposure is equal to the pound price of British asset. Now we all know that, as just recall the equation which we have discussed, where there is a linear relationship between the dollar value of British asset and the spot rate between pound and dollar. Now here, if we have to explain, it means that there are certain other facts. If we see the first case, where we are not able to completely eliminate the foreign exchange exposure or manage foreign exchange exposure. So this is explainable because of two reasons. If we modify this first regression equation, the error factor which we have taken as 0 or silent, now here it comes into play. In the third case, there is error is equal to 0. That's why through forward cover we are able to completely manage our foreign exchange exposure. But in the first case, some residual value of the forward, that hedging is coming out. So it means we are not able to completely eliminate the foreign exchange exposure, and that is largely explainable because of that error factor. So it means if we say that exposure is equal to variance, the largely it is explained by the variance due to the spot rate and the other factors. So that other factors they are also coming into play, and in that other factor inflation is there and many more other factors which we have already discussed. So that is why this is the reason that in the first case, when the exposure is 1700 pounds, we are not able to completely eliminate the exposure by taking the forward cover, because there is some error factor and there are other factors other than spot rate. And in the third case, it was only the spot rate which was impacting the value of the British asset, the pound value of British asset and the dollar value of British asset, and no other factor. The increase or decrease in the prices of the prices, they were constant. It was only the spot rate. So we can understand this, that in the third case it is only the spot rate which is largely explaining the variation or the exposure. And if we are able to completely eliminate that, it means error factor is 0. But in comparison to that, in the first case, we are not able to completely eliminate the exposure. That's why there is residual value. We have seen that plus $170, then minus $170. So that is why there is an error. There are other factors also, and that other factor is is signaling. It's demarcating. It's pointing towards inflation. Inflation is also a factor, because in the first case we have seen that prices are increasing in contrast to the third case. So here we have seen that hedging is due to hedging or simply taking the forward cover of the exposure amount, we can manage our exposure or risk. But the thing is, still we haven't got the answer that to hedge or not to hedge. So in that case, we have to find out if we are hedging like the forward cover which we are taking, then all the three different scenarios what we are getting. In the first case, if the exposure is 1700 pound, and let's suppose the first case the what we were having. In the first case, the dollar value of British asset was coming out, the pound price was 980 pound, then exchange rate corresponding to that we took 1.4 dollars. So the dollar value of British asset was $1,372. And the second scenario was that the local currency, that is the pound price of British asset was 1000 pound, then corresponding to that the exchange spot rate was $1.5. So correspondingly the dollar value of British asset $1,500. And then we have calculated in the third scenario, when the pound value of British asset was 1070 pound, corresponding to that the spot rate was 1.6. So dollar value of British asset came out 1712. So these three different series of dollar value of British asset we are getting when we are not taking the forward cover, when we are not hedging. When we are not hedging, then in the first scenario we are getting this dollar value, in the second scenario we are getting something different, and third scenario we get different dollar value. Now after hedging, what is happening? Let's suppose in all the three scenarios we are taking the forward cover. So in the first scenario, when we assume that the exchange rate is 1.4 and the forward rate was 1.5. So the total exposure, the total forward cover has to be on 1700 pound. So there was a positive inflow of proceeds from forward contract. It was $170. So you add this proceed of forward contract with the dollar value of British asset. Dollar value of British asset, which was 1,372. So 1,372, the dollar value of British asset, plus 170 the dollars proceeds from forward contract. Proceeds from forward contract that we will be getting. And then second scenario, the $1,500 is the dollar value of British asset, and after going for forward cover, here the spot rate will be 1.5, so F minus S will be 0, so there will be no proceeds from forward contract. And in the third case, it will be minus 170. The proceed means here we have to pay $170, the US company has to pay. So here if you see the dollar value of British asset after forward cover in the third scenario will be 1,712, the dollar value of British asset, minus 170, the loss under forward cover. So it is 1,542. So you see, you get three figures, three series of three after forward cover: 1,542, then 1,500, and then 1,542. So initially these are the expected dollar value of British asset after forward cover, after taking forward contract. And in the first case, and earlier we have taken before forward cover, if we don't go for any amount of any hedging strategy. So you just calculate the variance. More variability means there is more risk. So if we are not going for any forward cover or any hedging, so then the total variance of that dollar value of British asset, the three figures, it is giving us the variance of 19,659. So, and in the latter case, when we are taking some forward cover, that is after hedging, post hedging, 1,542, 1,500, 1,542. So we got the variance as 392. So you see the reduction in the variance. Tremendous, and the magnitude of reduction is very large. So it's better here to go for hedging, because almost it is not able to completely eliminate the risk, because the still variance is there. But in comparison to a position of not hedging, hedging is beneficial because variance is coming down very much. Then in the third case, which we have taken when there was no inflation in the British economy, when the pound price of British asset was 1,000 pound, and corresponding to that the dollar price of British asset was 1,400, 1,500 and $1,600. So you can calculate the variance of 1,400, 1,500, 1,600. Of this you will get a figure of the variance will come out 6,667. Now what happens if we take forward cover? Then total the forward cover will be selling pounds forward, and that is 1,000 pounds. So F and S again. So the proceeds from forward contract will be calculated through this one, 1,000 pound multiplied by F minus S. So F is the forward rate, S is the spot rate. So in the first case, if we assume that forward rate is $1.5 and S is the spot rate, and that we know that 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, three different spot rates we have considered. So 1.5 minus 1.4, it gives us what we call 1,000 multiplied by 0.1, because 1.5 minus 1.4. So this gives us positive proceeds from forward contract 100. So if you add this in the dollar value of British asset, you get 1,100. You get $1,500. The 1,500 the value in terms dollar value $1,500 in terms of the British asset. And in the second case, when the spot rate is equal to forward rate, again you get 1,500, because there is no proceeds from forward contract. And in the third case, when we assume that S is 1.6, so here the proceeds from forward contract will be minus 100, and the dollar value of British asset is 1,600. So subtract minus 100 from that, you get 1,500. So 15, 15, 1,500. In all the three scenarios, you get the same value of same dollar value of British asset. So here, but natural variance is completely is zero. So it means if variance is zero, it means post forward contract or post adopting hedging strategy, we are able to completely eliminate our any kind of exposure or risk which the firm was facing on its British asset. in comparison to first scenario. And we have also discussed that initially, that in the first case, when inflation was there, when the pound price of British asset was increasing, the firm was not able to completely eliminate what we call exposure, because there still exposure was remaining even after going for the forward cover, plus 170, then 0, and minus 170. And in this case, see, if we are going for some hedging strategy, we are able to completely eliminate the exposure or risk which firm is facing because of volatility in the spot market. So it means that to hedge or not to hedge, it depends on calculations. You have to visualize the future. You have to visualize the figures, what they are going to be, and visualization of not only the figures but also in terms of all macroeconomic indicators like inflation rate or forward rate or the spot rate, because we have taken different scenarios and you have to do all simulative kind of exercises. And after that, and for that purpose, lot of softwares are available. The large multinational companies, they do all these things with help of through software, to hedge or not to hedge, because to hedge or not to hedge, the difference can result in billions of dollars of losses or gain in terms of positive or negative cash flows. So this is very important and significant factor that we have tried to answer with help of this illustration, to hedge or not to hedge. Thank you.